Welcome everyone to the Living Consciously television show, coming to you live from our Denver, Colorado TV studios. Happy New Year to everybody. This is our first show in 2015. Happy New Year to our guests and also our guest casts. And I want to make sure that everybody knows that we are streaming live on YouTube Live, as well as Google Hangouts and on ConsciousEvolutionMedia.com. I'm your host and also your moderator, and I started Conscious Evolution Media more than 10 years ago, and I'm having a fantastic time doing it with the rest of my friends and cast members. Our theme today happens to be something that's I am absolutely interested in, which is how to heal from sexual trauma. And our guest cast today is Deb Maybury. Welcome to the show, Deb.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much. It's good to be here. I think it was the last time was about a year ago, I think. So it's great to be in touch again.
How time flies. And
it does.
Where are you from?
I'm from Toronto, Canada.
Oh, that's right. All right. So our friends up north, and we also have our cast members, and Linda Dyer is joining us from the place where the kangaroos are running wild, and that's Australia. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. They are running wild at the moment because the bushfires are pushing them out of the forest. So it's very, very hot and dry here.
All right, awesome. So also we're expecting Ninon de Verderosa. She usually joins us from Las Vegas, and she's running a little bit late, so she will come into the studio whenever she's ready. And other than that, first question goes out to Deb, and I'm just curious. I'm sure our viewers as well. Sexual trauma, what would you say out of 10 people, how many would have experienced sexual trauma in their lifetime?
Well, if you look at the statistics alone right now, the latest stats that are out there, the numbers are 1 in 3 females and 1 in 5 males. So that's a lot out of 10 people.
That's a lot. Yes, I would say, and I would also say that it's probably still not probably, definitely still is a taboo subject, right? Because people don't want to talk about it.
It is, unfortunately. It falls in that same area of mental illness as another one. You know, don't see it and it'll go away. And that's what my mission is truly as an advocate in the area of sexual abuse is, you know, the healing. But it's to speak about it, and we need to eliminate the stigma and the taboo that are attached to sexual abuse, so people can move towards healing without the shame and like the guilt feelings that's so frequently keep them, you know, from revealing anything.
Right, I get it. I feel that we made quite a bit of strive in terms of gender differences, you know, homosexuality, same-gender marriages, because we can openly, how do we know? Well, we can openly talk about it, and people do want to talk about it. So I'm wondering if that's a model. Well, what do you think the success of that is? That people are not able to talk about it. We're seeing it on television. You know, I've seen guys kissing on television, guys making out, women kissing, women making out. Right. How did we get to this openness, and why? How do we copy that? With sexual trauma.
Well, first of all, it has come a long way, and certainly. You know, I think when a lot of celebrities start to come out, both, you know, with the homosexuality or interracial relationships or saying they have breast cancer, I mean, all these things used to be taboo topics in the past. And there are a lot of people that are coming out in terms of sexual abuse. And there is a trend, and it is building momentum, absolutely. There are a number of celebrities, starting from the most famous. I mean, Oprah came out a long time ago. Ellen, and I mean, there's just so many of them in Toronto here. We have a picture, you know, Mr. Dickey, he's also come out, and there's so many celebrities that are starting this trend of coming out. And if you look around in social media, there are a number of people that are writing and talking about sexual violations. And in fact, there was a tagline, It had to do with one individual who put it out there saying that, you know, I've been raped kind of thing, and it went completely viral. It was on Twitter. So a lot of people are starting to come forward and speak out, but it's a difficult one because, I mean, so much of this is happening within families, and that is something that people didn't realize was so common. And that's frightening to talk about it when it's in your family.
Yeah.
And quite often it is. As a coach, you know, I come across family when they were children. It was, you know, and in fact, they haven't been to any person to let them know about it. So it's interesting that the statistics say 1 in 3 women or 1 in 5 men. I'm wondering how many people out there haven't put their hand up and said, look, I was, and so they don't become, if you know what I mean, a part of the statistics. Because every second coaching client that I reckon I've ever dealt with had some sort of sexual abuse. And my next question, therefore, is what do they actually qualify as sexual abuse? What has to happen to a person? Because that's got to be, you know, this wide apart, surely.
And that's an interesting thing. The two parts to that, Linda. I mean, great questions for sure. And certainly we know that there are a number of people that don't even reveal ever that anything happened to them. I mean, that is, statistics are only as good as, you know, how you interpret them, because there are so many people. I think that the one statistic about that is that there's just a handful, maybe 2% of people that are apparently reporting it. One study that I looked at. So if you look at the numbers there, and then you go, oh my gosh. And then if you look at the second part of your question, which is what actually qualifies as sexual abuse, well, some people may say that a pat on the butt is sexual abuse.
I don't think so.
Exactly. Or you're sitting at I actually had this happen. I was sitting with a group of friends at a bar almost 30 years ago now. How frightening that is. But there was a man that had too much to drink, and he came up from behind one of the girls that was sitting right beside me, actually, and he reached over her shoulders and he grabbed her breasts. So is that sexual abuse? That's a sexual violation, but is it abuse? It's so hard, you know. You've got an old uncle. I had an uncle who was always trying to, you know, kiss everybody on the lips, but it wasn't like a family kiss. It was a kiss that was, you know, I think when it's an individual interpretation, you get that kind of chilly thing up your spine. You know, it's an interesting thing because, you know, that there are so many people that can, let's say that situation where that woman was grabbed from behind on the breasts. I could see, and Linda, you could see somebody in a coaching session and facilitating that person never would have got over it, that was a violation, that person touched them in a certain way. Somebody else would get up out of there and just laugh and maybe slap them or, you know, make a joke out of it. So that there is this wide, you know, this wide range. And if you look at the model that they often, you know, provide to children, you know, the good touch, bad touch area, and it's sort of like the bikini bathing suit. You know, if you touch in that area, then that's sexual abuse. So it's a tough one, and I think it's different in different places.
Well, so let's explore that for a second. So, all right, so I know just for myself, I haven't experienced any sexual trauma when I was young that I know of, and I guess there could be always that part where it's blocked out of our subconscious and conscious mind, correct? I mean, I could have had experienced sexual trauma, but I just don't know it, nor I remember it, right?
It would still be in your subconscious mind, but
right,
of course
right,
in your conscious mind.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have access to my subconscious mind, so I guess that's a possibility. But consciously, I don't remember experiencing anything. So what I want to explore is I was very sexually active from the time that I can remember, from 12 years old. So how do you separate? So could I be a person that caused sexual trauma for other girls because I was playing around as a kid? And that happens a lot in families, as I'm learning.
Great question. No, seriously, it's a great question. I just went through a group, and this came up, and there was a lot of discussion about that, because one of the individuals was around that age that you mentioned when you started to become sexually active. You know, and it's so hard because one person would think it was just, you know, nothing, or just
I didn't even know that. I didn't even know I was doing anything wrong.
Yeah, well, that's a huge thing too, and that's why a lot of guilt comes into play later on. You know, I also coached with somebody, and he had never told anybody before, ever, and he had touched his sister in a sexual way, and he didn't even realize it at the time because he was around 11 years old, and later he felt a tremendous amount of guilt around that. He did, and when he spoke to her, she had more let it go. So, you know, it's such an individual interpretation of what has happened to you. And I, again, facilitate people where they barely remember anything, and yet they feel such a violation, whereas at the time when it happened, they didn't even know it was a bad thing. You know?
Yeah. So I want to give you actually an example from my own life that's happening right now, and maybe you have some ideas or recommendations on, you know, what could be done. But so my youngest son has 2 kids, and one of them is his natural daughter, and the boy is from his wife's previous partnership. And the boy is 12 years old. My granddaughter is 6. And they have been playing around at night. All of their bedrooms are upstairs, including their parents, and they have been sneaking into each other's bedroom and playing around. So when the parents found out, they didn't ask me, nor did they ask my ex, which is too bad. But what they did is they looked for counseling. And I want to talk about this openly on television right now, because I'm sure a lot of other people make this mistake. Knowing what I know today, that was a huge mistake. You know why?
Go ahead.
Because once we give it over to the government, you have no control. So what happened, immediately as soon as they called, the counselor called social services. And within 24 hours, the boy was separated from the family. And this was probably 6 months ago. He's still separated from the family, and it's a huge mess. And I don't know how long it's going to take. It's possible that it will take 2 more years for the boy to be able to come home. The social services, you know, has court orders from the court that the brother cannot be close anywhere. So they have to make special arrangements for Christmas, for the holidays. They can never be together. And there is no way that they can prove even what they did to each other. There's no way to prove it. But the government is so interested in this and interested in proving them wrong, that they were bad parents. I mean, this is craziness, Deb. It's absolute craziness. And the parents have no control. The government took over.
It's a very complicated topic. First of all, the ages. What age is a child responsible? What age is a child beyond that innocence of exploring bodies? And at 12 and 6, that's a big age gap. And I think I have to say that it's so unfortunate, because what that is doing is putting a whole lot of shame, blame, guilt, remorse. Now the kids think for sure that, you know, they're dirty and they did something awful and they've changed each other's lives, and the parents also just must be heartbroken because they reached out thinking that they were going to find some solutions.
Yeah, but they didn't get help. What they got is more problems, substantially more problems.
Yes.
So where is the child, Steve? Where's the 12-year-old?
The 12-year-old is in a home that's designed, well, not a home. It's kind of a public place where it's designed. There are 6 other boys in there. So what do? The government thinks this is really cool. They put these kids that are sexually active together with other boys. I mean, this really works. It's got to work. And how do you watch them, like, 24 hours a day, every minute? I don't know.
I think each case has to be looked at individually. So if you have boys, say that I don't know how old these kids are, but let's say you have a range of age from 11 to.
Well, it has to be. Nobody can be in there on the, over 18. So I've been in there, and so you have anybody from 12, 13, 14, anything in between.
Like, there's a huge maturity level between a child that's 11 and 12 years old and one that's 16, 17, 18 years old. Mm-hmm. And I mean, they're still putting the younger ones at risk. See, there's a whole different level of a perpetrator as well. Like I said, you can have it. It's not innocent because it's not right to be sexually experimenting like over and over. Like, you might once in a while look at a sibling or something and go, what's that, or whatever, but when you're actually engaging, that's a whole different thing. But here, you could have a 12-year-old who's almost doing nothing, and I take that lightly, okay? Then you can have a 12, 13, 14-year-old who's grabbing that little child. From 12 to 6, that's a huge size difference. Mm-hmm. And they're forcing something, they're just, they're penetrating, or they're, it could be a wide range of things that are happening, and each case has to be looked at very separately, and for the parents, it's so unfortunate. I mean, I don't know anything about it, but we always say, where I facilitate, it's like, okay, pause, and that's hard to do because you're hurt and you're angry in that situation.
Well, also, it's interesting. I find it interesting that the way social services is trained and the way they do interviews is that they put words in kids' mouth. It's like they have tricky ways to have kids say things that they never meant to say, or it was never the truth. But because of the way they're being manipulated into saying things so that the social services person can actually use the interview in court.
Oh gosh, Steve, it is so complicated. I guess your laws, I'm not sure exactly how they work in each. They're probably different in each state. But I know here, for example, if a child went and told the teacher something, the teacher's obligated. There's no choice. The teacher must report it. They must make a phone call and report it.
Yeah, they obligate it here. Yeah, it's the law.
But I would think there would be some privacy. It's along that fine line too. You have a perpetrator that doesn't want to be a perpetrator and asks for help, and where do they go? And I'm never condoning any behavior, but when somebody's reaching out for help, and when that family's reaching out for help, if
so, so in this case, what it seems like to me is like you are guilty unless you can prove that you are innocent. And the way the court system and the whole system is set up, it's very difficult to prove that this kid is innocent.
It's almost like you're also losing hope for that child, because once he's in a system, what is happening to him there? And I mean, that happens so often when children get taken out of homes and then they're repeatedly violated in foster care and these types of facilities, because if you get an older child that is a more aggressive perpetrator, and he's going to take advantage of the 12-year-old. It's just such a tough situation.
And also, he's already come from a family that where dad and mum separated. So, what's he feeling like now? Because he's been pulled out of a second family now. So it's, very, very traumatic. And also, Steve, I'm interested, how are the parents coping?
Well, it's very tough. There's a, mom, has a hard time with the whole thing. They're being very careful so that the daughter is not being blamed. And I don't know how successful they are. I mean, I have my granddaughter come over here time to time. I mean, we spend time at Christmas time, and she seems to be doing okay. She's, kids are, I guess, really resilient. She hasn't come to me and talked to me about, missing his brother or anything like that. But that's got to be there. I mean, the fact that all of a sudden now, because of whatever you guys did together, all of a sudden my brother now is yanked out of the house and I can never see him again. that's got to have some, you know, not repercussion, but it has to have some consequences.
They're going to be long-term effects, for
Yeah.
sure. And one of the things that I think that is so important is for the communication to continue in a very non-judgmental way. There are some children's books out there that potentially that could serve the family, and that the young lady becomes aware, because she, at that age, I mean, I was violated when I was that age, 6 years old, and it's so confusing. You don't even know what's happened. You know, you can't comprehend what's going on. At first, she thinks what they're doing.
I mean, she
is
doesn't
they're
even
just
have the
playing.
language for
That's
the
the whole.
conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's the whole thing. It's age-appropriate education that, you know, is one of the things that they're advocates in, you know, in the States and in Canada, trying to get that in the school systems, because I mean, we don't even say, you know, eye, nose, breast, vagina, you know, it might be boobies or it might be wiener or something like that, you know, and it's really important to have the language so kids can actually say what is happening to them. And if we're talking about that freely, then she may have, on the first encounter, or he may have, you know, said, you know, whatever his name is, you know, Billy is showing me his penis, Mommy. Like, I mean, if you have those kind of conversations with your children right away, just you know, and then they will, you know, they can talk about those things early on, rather than it's been so secretive to say, you know, it's a vagina, you know, and who cares if it's who cares? It's a private thing, but that's your, you know, and then if somebody touches you there, just let me know. And if you're, it's kind of like I always knew I was adopted, so there was never a shock whenever anything came up. And yet I have friends that didn't find out they were adopted till later, and there was a shock, a big shock. You know, so I kind of think it's the same idea, because she went from just playing with her stepbrother to all of a sudden now they were doing something bad. So she really needs to, you know, to understand that.
Not only was she doing something bad, but they told that it's like, you not only were doing something bad, but it was bad enough to have your brother removed from the house.
Yeah, my goodness.
You know, oh yeah, and as you say, who knows the ramifications of that down the track.
Yeah.
It's interesting though that in so many of those situations that when I'm coaching, they come up with this, you know, it's a secret. So I'm wondering how much of the lack of communication is based around the fact that the perpetrator has really convinced the other person that it's just our secret. And so, you know, if you tell anybody, and everyone knows that, you know, if you tell a secret, it's gone forever. And I'm wondering how much that adheres to that lack of communication, that ability to go and tell mum or dad about what's happening because it's just my secret, or, you know, my secret and my brother's or whatever.
Well, in the situations I know where it's particularly brother and sister, and step or not step really is insignificant to me, but a lot of the times it is, you're treated special. This is your special time, and it is a secret. Like, don't tell because you're the only special one, and you know there's so many different ways to convey it. And you know, in some situations there's pressure. It's very clear. Do not tell. If you tell, then you will be in trouble, or I'll be in trouble, or we'll be in trouble. Don't tell, or I'll hurt your mom, you know, in more serious situations. So it's, yeah, that's the thing with her. I mean, she did.
And another thing that I've come up with, Deb, is, and this was from a professional man that divulged his sexual abuse, and he said to me straight out, he said, a part of me liked it. He said, I've got to be honest about that, because while, yes, it's sexual abuse and all the rest, he said, when I look back, that was really an only time I was genuinely felt loved, you know, and part of me knew, even as a young child, part of me knows that it's just so terribly wrong. But the other part of me says, well, you know, I quite like that feeling. So, you know, and then you've got the secret on top of that.
Yeah, another very valid point. Instantly, I think of two people in my book. One of the gentlemen in there, he had no idea that there was anything wrong with it. He got together with, the babysitter, and she was older, and it felt good. And I mean, a male's gonna be aroused and have pleasure out of that. And there are a lot of people that then feel awful later on, because then, the education that you're receiving later on is that that was abuse. And I actually was on a show not that long ago, a call-in show, and the man that was interviewing me actually made fun of it, like, yeah, so you want that to happen, don't you? I mean, when I'm a 14-year-old boy and there's an older woman interested in me, and yet it's like, you have to be very careful with that one, because there is a violation. And the other point that you mentioned, Linda, I've heard this many times too. I'm thinking about somebody just in a session that I was just working with, where she said, I wasn't getting love. Actually, there were two people in the session, both of them. I wasn't receiving physical love, touch, hugging. I didn't feel loved at home. I just felt like I wasn't wanted and unworthy. And, so when I received that type of attention, then I felt good. And it wasn't considered abuse in the individual's mind, because it's a child and they really can't distinguish, where's that line. And it's touch. So is hugging okay? Well, then, as if I, touch you here, is that okay? And it's just very confusing for a young child. It's more as people age, then they realize, and then it's like, oh, I'm going to avoid my cousin because, oh my gosh, we did that, or he kind of made me do that, or she did, and it's, yeah, there are no clear cuts. Answers.
I've noticed
so
once when I was coaching, I had a demonstration going on up in Queensland, and the people who come to the front of the room where I do the demonstration of clearing an emotion of anger at this point in time, they actually volunteer. And I said, is there anybody got some anger issues up? And what was happening was she was retiring and going off with her husband on basically around Australia trip, as you do. And she felt awkward about how it was going to be between them, because she felt a little awkward about her sexual relationship, even with her own husband, and never had a reason as to why. Anyway, we go, she agrees to do the demonstration, as you've seen it before, and we get into, we go right down through the subconscious and into when she was a child, and all of a sudden she goes, I can clearly see the male babysitter playing with me. And it had been sitting in her subconscious as part of a pattern of the dendrite between the neurons, and it had never, given her reason. She was 2 years of age. It had never given her a reason to deal with it but something in her psyche told her that there was something not quite right. She didn't ever feel really excited about sexual activity. And when this came up, I said, do you want to continue with the process? You're in front of a group. She said, oh yeah. She said, I feel really great that I've just found out why that feeling came about in the first place. She said, but it was so clear as to what happened to me, because consciously, as you know, those first 7 years, we don't have a conscious. We just have our subconscious, where everyone's giving us information. So she didn't have the ability to ask, but why? Why? It was just take it on board like a sponge.
Yeah, well, as you know, thanks for sharing that. I mean, as you know, there are many individuals that struggle in relationships because of unresolved issues surrounding sexual abuse, and there are a number of them that remember nothing, or they remember very little, but they just, it's stuck, like you say. The trauma sticks, and it lands somewhere until we deal with it, and it shows up in many different ways, and certainly sort of sexual dysfunction is one way, as it shows up, with anxiety and depression and numbing strategies with alcohol and drugs. It shows up in many different ways that we haven't resolved it, as other traumas do as well. That this one, certainly, it shows up in a lot of relationships.
Yeah, well, one common theme I keep hearing about, Deb, on our network, a lot of shows that we've done in the past, where people with issues of obesity, especially women, when the protection for them in life becoming really heavy. So that way, nobody would want them sexually. Is that accurate?
It's very common. It is with men and women. I see it. I see it with both. Certainly, if you don't want sexual attention to make yourself unattractive, whether it's being overweight, whether it's being unkept, poor hygiene, whether it's avoiding social situations, all of these things. A number of these people do this because they absolutely don't. So there's sort of the two streams. The one stream is, I don't want anything to do with anybody. I don't want anybody touching me. I don't have any satisfaction in that. I feel dirty. I just can't connect, right? So there's a block there. The other extreme is somebody that then they've started a sexual relationship, even though it's a violation, when they're younger. They are always ahead of their age group because they've been exposed to this, so they become more sexually active earlier. And because they don't value themselves, or there's nothing special to them about saving themselves or any of these kinds of things, then they just become very promiscuous, and they just go from one relationship to another. And again, I remember a woman that I worked with, and she just said, I would give sex easily. If somebody, if a guy's going to take me out to dinner to a movie, like, I don't care, have sex with them. She had no value on the relationship or the act of sex itself, because it was just something that she did, and she then got whatever she wanted as a result of that. It just was meaningless to her.
So before we talk a little bit more about how to heal from all this stuff, we should probably touch a little bit on the core family, because something I also learned just throughout the years doing these kind of shows, when we talk about sexual trauma, is the biggest perpetrators most of the time is close family. Is that correct?
Yeah, within the intimate family or just surrounding. So then that also that involves. We always thought it was going to be the stepfather, for example, right? That was a common one, but I mean the actual father, the mother, the grandparents.
Yes, the grandparents,
sisters.
has been a big one. That really surprised me. How many have been grandparents?
It's because that's the way we're socialized, like we're going to see grandma and grandpa, we're all excited. And
the kids trust with the grandparents, to drop them off and, babysit for them for a while they go out, there's no question,
Absolutely. I just interviewed somebody who is a coach. That's what she does. She's a professional coach in the area of sexual abuse, so works with people all over the world. And it was her grandfather that had violated her when she was a child, 11, 12 years old. So it's and it's, when I think, it's the brother or the sister, it's crazy, a cousin that's a male and female, it's both, and it's becoming more and more common. So, that people are talking about it, because before, the shame, like, you would never say, like, if that was your father or your brother, it would be hard enough to say if it was a cousin or an uncle, hard enough to say if it's a neighbor or a coach or the teacher. There are so many that are coming out now where it's a, the female teacher. It's just, so yes, it is, Steve, to answer your question, certainly it's within that family context. I think the number is about 80%, and the number that you'll actually know the individual, so you just know them, whatever capacity, is about 93%, the latest statistics that I heard. And that's phenomenal, because, we always talk about stranger danger, and when I'm working with high school girls and I go in and I talk about self-protection and self-defense and making wise decisions, I always say, watch out for strange behavior. It's not about a stranger, because a stranger can actually be the
it's
one
not about someone that you have never seen.
That's only 7%.
The person could be right in front of you.
It's very, very small. The statistics out of America is about 25% of girls that go to university or college will be raped. And it's almost like, it's never right to do, but it's almost like you're setting yourself up by leaving your door unlocked or going out, and they just don't know the statistics or the probability, because it can't happen. It just can't happen to me, kind of thing,
So what about this other big group that we don't talk about ever, which is church? I mean, there's several things that turns me off about church, but that's definitely one of them. is, you know, how can the church not do anything and just put up with this stuff? I mean, it's just not acceptable. And people have told me before that, well, we're human, you know, people in the church are human. I said, I don't care. It's not acceptable.
First of all, I hear you. First of all, it's in every association where there are children around, and that includes, you know, scouts and brownies and teams.
In schools,
Everywhere that, you know, perpetrators are going to find a way, regardless of what we do. And I think the only reason why people really scream at the church is because the church is supposed to be a sacred place. It's supposed to be a safe place.
We should be able to trust.
Yes.
Anything.
Listen.
If anything, you should be able to trust the church.
Yeah, but shouldn't you be able to trust the scout leader? Shouldn't you be able to trust, you know, your teacher? So I don't put any more weight. I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I'm certainly a spiritual person, and I've certainly prayed and pray at different times. I just maybe pray to a different God. And this, again, a lot of people say it's a Catholic church. No, it's in every church. I've had people that have told me, this, the one chap that comes in to my shop, and he says, you know, I'm Jewish. And he's seen the book, and he says, it happens everywhere. You know, it's not just the Catholic, the priest.
Yeah, it's not about the type of religion. Yeah.
Yeah, and I did interview.
And quite often the priest is a friend of the family.
Oh, listen, it's
the thing that isn't acceptable. I mean, I can be with the fact that yes, I get it that the, you know, the people in the church are human too. I get that. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that they put it under the carpet, and they don't want to deal with it.
Yes, again,
that's what concerns me.
That's a scout thing too. I think it is shifting a little bit now because it has been outed. The first I heard about something happening in the church, let's see, I was still living there, so it was about 25 years ago, and it was a shock because I was watching W5, which is a news program here in Canada. And I heard I was sort of doing something, and I heard a name, and that young boy's name was Henrik Helmer. And when I was in about grade 6, Henrik Helmer was in my school in Kingston, Ontario. He was in grade 8, and he had just switched over to grade 9. And I remembered him because he played at a recital at the school, and he played the song The Entertainer. And I was completely blown away, so I always remembered him. I learned when he was in grade 9, he took his life. He hung himself. And I was told, all the kids learned that Henrik had taken his life because he had a brain tumor. And he wanted to control what happened to him, so he took his life. His parents found him downstairs, hung in the basement. So I'm watching this program when I'm about 25 years old, and I hear his name. And it was about the church. He was one of a group of kids that were violated by the priest, or sorry, not the priest, it was the music instructor at the church had been violating those kids. And then it's in a book too that I read later when I was studying to write Unlock the Door. I was doing research, and in that book it talked about that situation in Kingston. It highlighted 3 situations, and one was that situation in Kingston because that's when it all hit the fan about the Catholic Church. So it's a small world sometimes on these kinds of things, but I think that it is more and more where it used to be that somebody, you know, they would identify somebody and they would just move them to another church, to another community, and that I think they're handling that better than they had because I know actually somebody, I'm forgetting his name right now, but he actually went and spoke to the Pope. He's in the UK. Peter Saunders. He's with NAPAC in the UK, and he actually had an interview with the new Pope. And the Pope obviously asked him to come and speak about it because he wanted to learn more about what was going on. Because I mean, he wants the church to rise, and this is one of the issues that's taken the church down. So I think that, you know, what do I know really? But I mean, I think that they're aware that they need to do something about this.
Oh, I think they're very aware because just recently there was a statement made that they actually believe that maybe by not allowing the priest to have sex that they've made a mistake. Like, whoops, millions of people have been raped by by priests who wanted to have sex, but they're priests, and maybe they got. We don't know if they got into that profession.
I struggle with that one. That's
I know.
I know this guy. Again, in my book, Pat Wicklund,
Yeah.
Her husband ended up being a pedophile, being arrested back in the '80s, and she was crucified. And they were like, if she'd been a better wife, he wouldn't have went after kids. Well, wait a second here. You do not go after kids because you're unhappy with your sex life. You go, if you're not happy with whoever it is that you're with, you go to another adult. You don't go to children.
Yeah.
That's just. And I listen. I support whatever the church. I support that. Open. Let's let the church have husbands, wife, whatever. Whatever they want to do there. But it's not going to stop.
So hang on, Deb. This is an important piece. So what you just shared is very important. So to me, when somebody's solution to a problem, like a problem where he is not happy with the wife, and then he goes to children, is, to me, what that means to me, it's a question of consciousness. So I don't believe, and that's what our network is all about, and that's why I'm bringing this up. And I know you want to bring up consciousness as well. I do not believe when somebody is conscious and living the life of consciousness and on a growth path, you are not capable of doing something like that. It's not in the cards.
Yeah.
Only when you are not conscious, you can do something like that.
Yeah, I just watched a documentary just a short time ago, and it was very moving. It was an interview with a man who said, I am a pedophile, but I'm not acting on it because I know the harm that it would cause, not only to the children, but to my way of thinking about myself and to my family. And he really took a chance, because just to admit that he had feelings for children, that will drive, there would be people that would want to crucify him. But it's kind of like we all have attractions to different people, but when you're in a relationship, that's the, you are at that conscious level, and that you're with that person. It doesn't mean you're not attracted, to some other people, but it just means that you don't act on that. You can say, I'm a human being. That, happened. There's yes, that's a beautiful person, but this is the person that I'm with.
Well, it's the test that I use, and that's just me. I'm not saying that anybody else needs to use this, but the test for me is that in the highest and best interest of me and everybody else? And the answer to that question would be no. Right?
Yeah, I think that when you're conscious, you're always in tune. It's sort of the one that we're all one. If I step outside on the grass and I'm touching the grass, I'm connected to everybody else on this planet that is on the grass. And none of us is perfect, but I think that if we really explore what are we here to do, to accomplish, to be, to share, how to serve, if we're in that state, I think to violate another human being, like a child is so innocent, I just can't. There are desires that people have. It doesn't mean you act on them. And I think when you're conscious, you can be aware of that. And this individual in this documentary, he went and he sought help, and he was tuning into that and being honest with himself and with other people. And I think I have so much respect for that, because he also put that out there to the whole world. It was on YouTube, so it's out there for everybody. And just think if even a percentage of perpetrators saw that and went, you know what, I don't really want to do this, so okay, what can I do? How can I be helped? And they can really be served by somebody like that, really stepping out.
Yeah, no question. So how can we help all of the viewers out there that have had sexual trauma experiences in their lives, and how can they heal? I mean, what's the process? Well,
there's a few things for sure. One thing is, if somebody does reveal something to you, is don't feel you have to fix it or have all the answers. It's just, we always say we pause. and we listen, and we don't get into, oh, that's, all the judgmental things. Oh, that's disgusting, or why didn't you tell sooner, or you should do this or that. We don't should on each other. So we listen as somebody being told. We ask how we can support that individual. There are a number of things online now in terms of resources. One of the best websites I've seen is called NAPAC, NAPAC.org. And it's in the UK, but it has incredibly great resources. In the States, there's something called RAIN, RAIN. It's another great resource. So as an individual, I think that there are 3 components to healing. And this is just personal. One is that you have to reveal it to somebody, a trusted person. It could be somebody who's, like Linda, doing coaching. I mean, it often comes out when you're talking about other struggles in life. It comes out. We have to be honest with ourselves. I had a woman call in on a show a few weeks ago, and she's a practitioner, a healthcare practitioner, and she says, I know so many of these people have been violated and they won't talk about it. I said, put out some pamphlets, put out some reading material that you have, and give them an opportunity to look without being judged, because in their mind they're going to be judged.
So what's the cost of not sharing it? Would it be the fact that you're gonna stay stuck with it?
Oh, the costs are huge. I've mentioned some of them.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a number of things: depression, anxiety, masking of pain in terms of addictions. And you mentioned one, eating addictions. People overweight. That's often why. It's because they're suppressing a lot of feelings. Drugs.
Never
and
going
alcohol.
into another relationship was one that I came across. She was just about to get rid of yet another man in her life because all she could ever see was her father, and he was the most beautiful man. And in the end, we got tough with her, and they're together and married now. But it was like, how can I? At the end of the day, it was, if somebody's abused me that's a male, how can I ever trust another one, And so sometimes they never really find that love again, because it's the trust thing's gone, and until we can bring that trust thing back, it becomes really awkward for them.
Yeah, thank you, Linda.
There's quite a few that never mention it too, like one lady that I coach, she said, I can never mention it because it was my sister's husband that raped me. She said, how many people are going to be disturbed if I let people know about this? There was another one with the priest, of course. How can I? And I said, look, we really need to do something about this. If you can't force anybody to do anything, but some of these people are baby boomers now, and they're saying, but if I divulge it now, my parents are going to die with that in their mind. I don't want them to die knowing that I was sexually abused as a child in their care. And it was their priest that they invited every Sunday over to our place, and he would take us to the park. It's just, and they would say, sure, that'd be fun. And the kids are all saying, no, Mummy, no, we don't want to go, but they never got it, and they've never ever been told. And so, when by the time I got to this lady, 35 years of holding it in, it was unbelievable. It was screaming stuff. But that, how do we allow somebody to just release it? She never even told her best friend for 35 years, so she didn't even know. So it's it's all kept in. And as Steve said, what can happen from this? Any emotion, when it's repressed, can fester as a disease. So, cancers and depression are just some of the things that can happen. But you could have, the lack of the ability to reproduce. You can have cancer in that vaginal area or breast area simply because you're holding back the emotion. Wherever you're holding it back, it can fester into the disease. So by releasing it, as Deb said, sharing it with somebody. However, when we say sharing it with someone you can trust, these people trusted that person that abused them somewhere down the track. And so that brings up a big whoa, what it's like for me, one lady said. You know what it's like for me about trust. You know, once I've lost it, and I said, well, it's the number one issue on the planet, isn't it? If we've ever lost trust with something or somebody, then it's not totally easy to get that back, or for us to say, go and tell somebody we trust. Who is that?
Yeah, trust is.
But don't you think that this is? I mean, what I'm hearing in between this conversation, which is really good stuff, is that it's never about the other people. That's just a justification. The conversation about how the other people are going to handle it is really not our concern. I feel that when people are completely able to love themselves, they can share themselves, and they can let go, and they won't be concerned about how the other people will handle it, because they will. You know what I mean?
But see, this is the issue with a number of people, a large number of these individuals, that they don't have a lot of self-love or a lot of self-worth.
Right. So the reason I'm bringing it up is that maybe that's one of the solutions, is how to teach people to love themselves.
Well, you know, when I was saying about revealing, there's different ways of revealing. There's looking in a mirror and saying, you know, the priest violated me, or the uncle violated me. There's that level of just saying, just accepting, this did happen and it wasn't my fault.
Right.
You know,
and I forgive them, and I forgive
Well, that's a whole other thing. You got to be careful. You got to get some traveling miles in before you start to. It's about forgiving yourself in a lot of these cases, because a lot of the times the people, they put it on themselves. They're blaming themselves because they didn't tell. But there's, you know, who do I reveal to? Okay, so if we're going to reveal, we need to talk about this. To me, these days, it's very specific that you would find somebody who works with people that have been sexually violated, more of a coach person in this area. Again, there are a whole bunch of sites on my Reveal, Connect, and Heal on the series I have on YouTube. That's what I focus on, is I interview people that are working with healing modalities to work with other people, to provide a variety of who to work with. Healing means not only that you reveal, so you reveal to yourself, you're honest with yourself, then you work with, let's say, a practitioner or a coach. It doesn't mean you have to go then and tell your parents or tell. A lot of people do, but you want to think about that, because what are your expectations when you do that? What's behind that? Because you're probably not going to get what you think you're going to get. If you're thinking you're going to get, oh, I'm sorry, you may get a complete denial. So you're going to get another layer of trauma on there. So I always say, work on yourself. You know, reveal that, accept that happened, and just start from that place. If you tell somebody and you're hearing judgmental responses, that's not the person that you want to confide in. The shame is on the perpetrator. And if you're talking and revealing with somebody and you're feeling shame by what they're saying, you know, why didn't you tell, or why didn't you tell earlier? When I first came out, there was an article after my book came out. There was an article in my hometown, and I received a phone call from my aunt, who was about 80 years old. She had never called me, ever, and she tracked me down and she called me, and she said, Debbie, well, first of all, she wanted to figure out who it was, and it was my boyfriend of my mother's, who was the last person who violated me. But she said, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me? Well, we didn't have any conversations that were leading up to talking about sexual abuse. I didn't even know what that was. I was confused. It was dirty. This is gross. Why is that man touching me? Or why did those other kids, why did they do that? Like, it was so confusing. It didn't have the maturity, the terminology, the words. How do you start that conversation? You know, you just look at you all of a sudden one day and say, hey, auntie, you know, that guy that mom's been going out with, yeah, well, he's been... You can't do that. You have to create a conversation with children at a very young age in order for that to be there. And I'll tell you one thing I said to this lady that called in on the show, this doctor. I said, you have to set an environment for people so they feel comfortable. So you get some pamphlets. You put out some books. You leave out some reading material. Because often people won't even go and investigate. You know, like now you can be private. You can go online. You can Google something and find out about other people that have been violated, or go on social media sites and people can't identify you. But in the past, people had no resources. And it was a big reveal, and they think they have to go to a psychologist. Well, you're going to pay your $150 an hour or whatever. People see it as expensive to do that. But now there are so many sites where you can go. You don't even have to identify yourself. You can listen. You can learn. But it's so important to accept that. And the other stage, because I want to get to this as well, is to integrate what happened. And in order to do that, you have to talk about all the things that we've talked about this evening. And that's, you know, there's anger, there's trust, there's how does this affect your relationship. One of the saddest things is sitting across from somebody who has children who says, I can't even hug my child. When my kids were little, I couldn't even hug them. Now they think I'm an awful parent and I'm distant because I am angry because all this has affected me. And now it's transferred down to the kids because the parents didn't know, you know, like listening to men saying I couldn't even change the diapers, and it wasn't because I thought it was gross or nasty or anything. It was because I was terrified that I could ever, you know, be touching in an inappropriate way. And even though that this individual knew he had no desire to, you know, to sexually violate his child, he just couldn't get it out of his mind that he'd been violated. So it broke down a relationship. So it's so important to go in and talk about these things and allow it to come out, like this woman did with Linda, that didn't even realize that.
Well, just for your information, not that you've asked, I made a decision on my own a long time ago that I will not change my grandkids' diapers. Not because it's gross, but I don't think it's my place. I don't think that I'm close enough in the family to be able to do that. I think it's got to be.
If you were babysitting and the little one.
Yeah, well, in an emergency, I would do it, but normally I wouldn't volunteer.
Yeah. I wouldn't either.
I just don't feel.
Yeah.
Just don't.
And how sad is that? And how for you to feel awkward, or for anyone to feel awkward? Where have we come to when, like, they're talking about? You know, here in Australia as well, the mum drives the child to school now. I mean, we all rode bikes and ran to school. But, you know, now everyone's driven because, you know, there could be a pedophile around the corner. The local newspaper came in today and it's got the pervert's been caught. What does pervert mean? Well, he's a Mexican tourist that's here in Australia for 4 days, taking photos of children undressed on the beach. You know, when mum gets them out of the surf, takes their cozies off. He's photographed over 5,000 photos of.
Wow.
And they now, they won't let him leave the country. They've taken his passport away, and a parent dobbed him in. So what does that parent now do? How does she protect her child from that happening again? It's just so sad that we've got so much going on to be, as the new mums coming up, to be on the lookout for, whereas, you know, we grew up on streets with bare feet and dirt roads and virtually did whatever. It's really, the changes are paramount.
Yeah. So let me just share one more thing, because I can't stand myself not to share this, because this happened this morning. We've been talking about obesity several times on the show. So I'm going to a meeting this morning, and I'm listening to this national radio network, Clear Channel Colorado, and they everywhere in the nation, like 1,300 or more stations. And the host is talking about obesity, and they're having a discussion, people are calling in, and what they're talking about, the conclusion they are coming to why there is obesity, number one is because the people around obese people are enabling them by bringing them lots of food, because obese people will have to eat anywhere between 10 to 15, 20,000 calories a day, and everybody's bringing food, so they enablers, number one. Number two, is the government needs to cut off aid to these people so that they can afford to buy all this food, because if they stop feeding themselves, they won't be obese. So that's the conclusion they come to after talking about obesity for like 15 minutes. Not once in the conversation has it come up that maybe they're not even obese because of what they're eating. That's just a symptom, and it may have nothing to do with the fact that they're obese. Isn't that interesting?
Yep, we either eat, drink, or do something with our emotions, and you can suppress it with food, you can suppress it with alcohol, but hey, let's blame the people that are bringing food to your house.
Yeah, it's all their fault.
Oh, I give up as a coach. Now we've got it solved.
So Deb, you were absolutely fantastic. Before we close out the show, believe it or not, the contest hour is gone.
Wow.
But before we close out the show, I would just like you to share one important thing, the most important thing. If someone is watching right now, or they're going to be watching later on the replay, and they're watching this show, and they have actually been sexually abused, and they have trauma, and because of what you said or what one of us said, or how we were coming through the show, or who we were being, they got touched, moved, and inspired, and they're ready to do something about it. What should they be doing?
Well, depending on where they live, I would say get in front of a computer and type in, "I've been sexually abused, who should I call?" or looking for websites. Like I said, RAINN is one in the States. Call a hotline. They're all over the world. And ask for help. And if you have a trusted, somebody that you really do trust, is to speak with them in confidence and share it. The first time to say, I've been sexually abused or sexually violated, or I was, that's the hardest time. And you know what? We suffer for so long. The shame is not on the person who's been violated, regardless of who it was who violated you. The shame belongs to the other individual. And it's something, revealing and talking about this and working this through is something that we do for ourselves. We need to empower ourselves to come to this point where we can share this, because it affects every way of our life. You can suppress it for quite some time, but at some point it typically will come up and it will show itself in anger, sadness, depression, and illness, physical illness. I mean, I had a fibroid, and there's no doubt in my mind why I had that fibroid was because for a long time I didn't speak about what happened to me.
Well, I'm sure lots of people have taken it to the grave with them, right?
Oh, many. Every time I speak with people, there's always somebody, I've never said anything. I had a man and a female in the last interview that I did. It was a call-in show, and they both were in their 50s, and they'd never said anything. They called in a call-in show because they felt it was safe. They didn't have to identify themselves, and just to let that out, you can imagine their relief. You have that secret you've never told anybody, and it's just been eating at you your entire life, and finally you get to just speak that truth. Wow. That takes a lot of courage, a lot of respect for people who do
and for people to know that we're here for them, Steve. There are genuine people here that really want to assist people who have been through any sort of abuse. And I think, Deb, your point of standing in front of the mirror and revealing it is brilliant. I mean, we do that for all sorts of stuff, not just sexual abuse, but to stand there and reveal that it's time to let it out, and you might surprise yourself with the amount of emotion that's followed with that. And as we release emotion, we release the stuff that's been suppressed, and so we release the need for the food to jam it back down, or the alcohol, or whatever. It is a brilliant thing to do. Just reveal it and let people help you.
Yeah, and just if I could say one more thing, Steve, there's so many people that they're going to, say, Alcoholics Anonymous or narcotics, they're doing diet after diet, and really behind all of that is very often sexual abuse or physical abuse, emotional abuse that has not been dealt with. And it doesn't matter how many years you go or how many meetings you go to, if you don't deal with what's at the core of your struggles, it's going to continue to be there. And it's amazing. I know people, many people that have addictions that I work with, and when they start talking about the sexual abuse,
I've been through a couple myself.
Yeah, it just you don't need to do the other things. Yeah, but it's good to work at it all together in a supportive environment for sure.
Yeah, and what did they say? I don't know if this is true. You tell me. that once somebody recognizes and becomes aware that they have an addiction, it usually comes in a pair, at least.
I'm thinking to the people, yeah, because you know what, we have addictions. Everybody is now addicted to email, for crying out loud. I mean,
how about smartphones? I work with a number of people. I work with a number of people that the smartphone is in charge, and whatever the smartphone wants, the smartphone gets, and the person is not in charge.
Well,
they can't say, it's ringing, and they can't say no.
Well, you talk about consciousness, Stephen. I think that is something that's really, really important. Is that it's like everybody else is getting control over our lives when we're. And I don't have one of those phones. I have a sensitivity to them, and I just refuse to get one that's attached to me. But other people are placing demands on us, and it's just even just time. Do you have time just to meditate in the morning? Do you have time to just get some exercise away from those kinds of things? One other thing I have to say too is, you know, a lot of people that are overweight that are happy being overweight and have no sexual abuse in their history and all that too. You know, I mean, there's different body types, so I just want to kind of, you know, say that one as well. Though I appreciate that people do eat for a whole lot of reasons, and it's the selection of food, you know, that causes a lot of problems, I think.
Yeah, that's a whole other subject.
Exactly. That's not what we're talking about. I just had to say that, though.
Thank you. Well, thank you. You've been absolutely fantastic. The show was very interesting, I feel, and it flowed very well. This is a very difficult subject, and I feel that all of us on the show, I mean, I felt very much at ease and trusted this whole hour. So thank you so much for being with us and also being with our viewers, and thank you for being who you are and what you do every day, because you're touching, moving, and inspiring people, no doubt in my mind.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And Steve, thank you so much for having me on your show and talking about this, because it's only through talking about it openly that the shame is, you know, that falls off people. It's so important. And Linda, always a pleasure to share time with you, my buddy from 2007. So always great to spend time.
Yeah, thank you, Linda, also.
Thank you.
We'll see you everybody next time on the next edition of Living Conscious TV, always Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Eastern, and 6 p.m. Pacific. Thank you all, and keep coming back and watching our shows on our website at consciousevolutionmedia.com, and go to YouTube to our site there. We got more than 1,500 shows there, and the more you watch, the more they get to the top 10, and you may end up on PBS. You never know. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve. You're doing a great job.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.